By the way, Nemo Nation is fast and furious. We keep them coming. We keep them on the move. This is somebody I've been trying to get on the show for a while. Friend of Brad Bentley, friend of mine, friend of the show, friend of the previous platform, and now her first time on this platform. Would you care to do the intros, Dave?
Yes, Michele Malski, and I haven't met Michele yet, but I'm about to in just a few moments. She heads up Spring, S-P-R-I-N-G. She's the founder and chief cook and bottle washer there. S-P-R-I-N-G. I'm going to ask Michele if she came up with this name. If so, she gets an award because this is genius. S-P-R-I-N-G. Succession Planning for Railroads. Investing in the next generation. That is a pretty comprehensive statement, Michele. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me once again. It's a privilege and honor to talk to you guys this morning.
Yeah, so Spring, did you come up with the name of that?
I sure did.
Fantastic.
I love my acronyms. So,
you need a job in Washington. You should be writing bill names. But when I saw that, I immediately thought, okay, so we're all in the same boat, because I think the inland waterway folks are having the same problem as well. If you move stuff in this country, or maybe in the world, and I think it is the world, Michele, because the same things are happening around the world, in terms of the age chasm, in terms of wanting to get into an industry that's been around for over 100 years now and all of that, railroad even longer than that. The technology is there. It's overwhelming the amount of cyber technology that rail and trucking and waterway boats have. Why aren't kids connecting to that? And I think the reason is, and I think you agree with this, is the fact that they think that by the time they get there, whatever they're going for is going to be gone or changed so much that it won't even be relevant.
That's a great point. And, I'll just start this whole conversation out by saying railroads ain't going anywhere. We've been around for 100
right.
years, and we'll be here for the next 100 and you name it for the future. We are a pretty adaptive organization, industry, and we've been around since the beginning, and very slowly we're adapting to change, like you said, with some of the new technology and some of the new spaces that we're starting to really develop more technology that helps us have precursors and pre-identifiers of if there's going to be an ice slide here, if there's going to be a mudslide over here. Do we need to get new ballast into the tracks? There's a lot of new technology that we're playing with. So it's really not your grandfather's railroad anymore, and we've really come into the future, which I'm pretty proud to say.
I'm going to say once again, everybody go to springrecruits.com. One of the other things is that, often what we see in our industry particularly is somebody will come up with an organization, it'll fill a gap, and then a group of people, rather than kind of joining that organization, will form their own organization. This is a great idea as well, the acronym, not just the acronym, but the institution itself, because there's a real gap here. There's a growing problem, like with diesel mechanics, like with actual lifestyle truck drivers. There's a growing issue here, and part of what you're doing, both in kind of getting the word out to veterans, but also to people who are looking for maybe a more active, sort of vital, strenuous lifestyle. This is a real opportunity. What is the biggest issue in regards to manpower facing the industry as you kind of move forward?
Absolutely, and I think that's a great question to get us started. And that's really why I started Spring just about 7 years ago now. And it's because there is that gap. And, the interesting thing is, the rail industry has been here for a while, right? It's been romanticized. We learned about it in Western history back in high school. But what happened in the future? What happened to modern day branding? What happened to marketing? You might see some of the bigger railroads, and there's 5 big class 1s in the U.S., but there's over 600 other railroads here right in your backyard that you probably don't know about. So we have a branding issue is really what it is, and an education issue here. We're not connecting with the same audiences that we did in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s when, railroading was kind of king. We have our own retirement system, which is pretty dope. And besides that, though, I mean, you're not really hearing much from the rail industry this year, and that's our fault. We got to own that. And that's really why I wanted to start spring, is one, to spring in action, right? There's kind of a play on words here a little bit. But we have to start re-engaging with all the different generations because they all speak different languages. And we just kind of are not speaking the language that we need to. And we really need to put the horses back in front of the cart here and start jumping into high schools and veteran bases and just educating folks about the industry. And I say that because we just started a nonprofit last year, another fun acronym called HERE. Hands-on education from railroad employers. So if you put these two things together, it's spring here, right? So the nonprofit is honestly all about education and getting out to any location that an audience has never heard about rail. We're going to go there and talk to you about, the freight railroads of North America. That's almost entirely privately owned and operated. And, like I said, there's over 600 railroads in the U.S., and we know very little about them. So to share that good message, to share the positivity, to share what we're doing about the future and how to connect, this is where we start.
Well, and it strikes me, by the way, this is a really great strategy because if I'm hearing you correctly, all the needs that the railroads have, all the needs that rail has moving forward, beyond just any sort of federal assistance, beyond any sort of, upgrades, infrastructure upgrades, none of that is possible right now at the level you need it to because the status and the understanding nationwide of the industry in a widespread way just isn't there. So until you kind of raise the profile of railroads, until you kind of help the country understand better how in-depth and intricate and integral it is to the nation's health economically, that none of the rest of the stuff is possible. You can't recruit when people aren't aware of the depth and the breadth of the industry. You can't get your infrastructure upgrades at the level you want to get them if people aren't aware of the industry. And that's really what you're kind of looking at doing. It seems to me, please, if I'm wrong, you're more than welcome to say, it's kind of wrong, Jimmy Mack. But that's kind of what you're pushing here, right?
Well, okay, there's just a little bit of a difference here. So freight railroads are almost entirely privately owned and operated. In fact, they put about 20% back into their own infrastructure. I mean, it is an $80 billion industry, right? So this is a big, the big boys club, right? This isn't small chunk change. And so you have these privately owned freight railroads that are putting all this money back into their own systems. You do have grants, you do have systems that help maybe build that big bridge, but for the most part, we aren't really reliant on public infrastructure. So, like I said, you will see some grants and things like that, and there's a whole nother discussion if we want to talk about transit and passenger. But if we just focus on the railroad, the freight railroad side, it's a very profitable industry. It's been around for forever, and if you look in your backyard, I'm sure within a mile, maybe 10. You're going to see one of those 140,000-mile route miles that cover the U.S. You're going to see some tracks somewhere nearby, and again, they're kind of privately maintained and operated, and I think that's something that we kind of wear as our badge of honor as well. We really care about safety. That's always been our number one thing. But kind of going back to your point is, if nobody knows you exist, then why would people apply to your jobs? So, I mean, if you don't ask a ghost to come to dinner, they're not going to eat anything, right? So you don't want to get into this habit of just assuming that, we're still king. We've got to fight with the Googles, everybody else that is going to these job fairs that, quite frankly, some of our employers, so any of my employers that are out there listening, we really got to amp up our game at getting out there and, again, just inspiring people. I mean, I came from a railroad family, so my story in and of itself is different and unique. And when I was, 5 or 6 years old, I remember walking into an empty grain silo before it got filled. And, man, to hear my echo just roar through that silo was such an inspirational moment for me that I'll never forget that. And to have and emulate maybe those same positive experiences with the next generation is exactly what we need to be doing to show them that, look, railroading is sexy. Be next to those big boy toys. They're awesome. I love when I see any engine come by. I love seeing the length of a train. So really, my game that I'd like any of our listeners to play is when you're sitting at a crossing next time, see how long that train is. that's going to be an indicator of how well our economy is doing. And so, and sometimes it could just be a quick switcher operation, so it might be a little bit shorter. But technically, when you see that big old long train, that's a pretty good sign. If you see it kind of short and that's a regular occurrence, could be another different indicator of the economy. I know some of your previous guests that you had on were talking about that as well. And so, again, we really are the heartbeat that move, so much of the bulk commodities and consumer products that we use every day in our household. But once again, nobody knows that it touched the rail system. And so, the only thing I would like to convey is that if you're curious, the rail industry is the best place for you to go, because you ask questions and there'll be, more answers. There's going to be more pathways for you to explore. And it's never a dull day. We have a saying in the industry that says you learn something new every day. And you'll hear that from a management trainee that's his first day out here in Whitefish, Montana, to somebody that's been around for 40 years.
We just had Aubrey Oden on, and maybe you heard Aubrey, so if you did, stop me, but she was explaining that to get women behind the wheel of trucks, she says, about the lifestyle. It's not a job, career, profession, it's a lifestyle. So if you can't live in a camper or an RV, take showers on the road and do all of that sort of thing, then you just won't be right for trucking. That's a great place to kind of test the water. Is there a way or a place to test the water in rail? And when you talk to high school kids, is it an awareness thing, or is it I don't want to do that because I'm into gaming or I'm into computers, that sort of thing. They don't realize how many computers are on these trucks or these trains, of course. But what do you kind of take out of what Aubrey said about the introduction?
Yeah, I think that was a very good raw statement that she said. I think that's very real and candid. The thing about, again, the industry, if you don't know anything about it, you don't really know how much opportunity is there. Mm-hmm. So whether you are a gamer, we have simulators that teach you how to essentially operate, and it's operate. You don't drive a locomotive. You operate it because there's levers. You go forward and backwards. You operate to learn how to operate and engineer a locomotive. So if you say that you're a gamer, you say you're in marketing, you say you're in finance, there's a home for you in the rail industry. We only know about conductors and engineers because maybe that's what we've seen on Amtrak, or that's what we've seen at a crossing, or whatever that may be. But really, when you look at it, the rail industry is a microcosm of every other job department that you could ever find in one place. Some of the bigger railroads even have nurses and doctors at their headquarters, to review medical notes, things like that. So honestly, I think the only job I would have trouble placing or interest would be a pediatrician. I don't know if there's a whole lot of room for pediatricians in the rail industry, but boy, if you've got the right curiosity, I'm sure we could find you a place too.
Back in the 1920s, parents used to mail their kids and put them on trains, so maybe if that comes back.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Michele, we are out of time. And by the way, we're going to get you back on. Promise us you'll come back because there's so much more to talk about in specifics. I'd love to have a conversation about all those different segments of the industry that people, where you guys need jobs and where you have positions to be filled. Promise us you'll come back.
I sure will, and I can't wait to tell you that story about that shot you have in Union Station one day. I've got a little history fun fact for you, and we could talk about that later, or be happy to share it whenever.
Guys, head over to springrecruits.com, also on the Book of Face at Spring, and that's all in caps, recruits. That's not on the Book of Face.